I was just looking back on the communion, and in a study that I had, part of a study this week, I asked the same question, and I wanted to hear the view from this platform as well. In First Corinthians 11, when Paul was sort of what you call it now, he was sort of just talking to the Corinthians about their attitude towards communion.
Mhm.
And based on what it says here, it sounds like the communion service for them wasn't like how we do it, where you
Yeah.
have a small portion. It was like a proper supper. Are we doing the communion service in the correct way? Because they it was actually, I was on a study with Imad, and he was saying that the how we do the communion service now is that the Catholics, they take a small bit, but actually how the Lord did it, it says the Lord's Supper. He was having a supper with his disciples, it was like a meal, and therefore when Paul commented on in First Corinthians 11 how they were behaving when they came to the communion supper, he was a bit saddened, as it were, and he really had to tell them off, so to speak.
Yes.
Amen.
Absolutely.
So is that
Absolutely.
the case that we're doing it not correctly then, or it's supposed to be a proper supper, not like a communion where you call it picking bread or whatever you as we do it now?
Absolutely correct. Because as you say, when we read what Paul says in First Corinthians, there, it's very clear that what they were doing, they were having a proper meal, and that's what Jesus had in the upper room. So the question is there a proper and an improper way, and are we doing it the improper way by having a little bit of bread and a little bit of wine? The thing is, when you read what Paul says, clearly the 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 meal that was supposed to commemorate and to represent the death of Christ and the life of Christ was being misused. Okay, people were using it as an opportunity to have a big feed. And Paul even says that some were eating and others were going hungry. So I rather think that the way it developed over time was because of that problem. So after a while, people figured out, well, if the bread is representative and the wine is representative, we don't have to have a big meal. We just need to have some bread and some wine. And if it's creating this problem, if there's this problem of greed, and some people are using it as an opportunity to fill their stomachs, then perhaps if we just have a token piece of bread and a token bit of wine, it will serve the same representative purpose, and it will eliminate the problem of people using it as an opportunity to gorge themselves. For me, I understand the reasoning, and honestly, I can't think of a reason why I would say there's something wrong with that kind of thinking. I've been to communion in Europe where you have a proper piece of a good piece of bread and a good glass of grape juice, freshly squeezed. In fact, they got grapes and they squeezed out a good amount of grape juice. Everybody got a full glass of grape juice and with a nice hunk of bread. So I've been to that kind of communion, but I don't know if it made any difference in terms of what we were looking at. We're focusing on Jesus and the life of Christ in the believer. And I think if you get a big piece of bread or a small piece of bread, I don't think it changes the meaning of what you're doing. Likewise, the wine. So I've felt myself understanding it. I've felt like it doesn't really matter. And I can understand why it's sometimes more convenient for to have a representative small piece of bread instead of a big meal. Because if you're having communion in church, for example, you're having a big meal. Usually, somebody has the trouble of preparing this, all of this. Usually, the pastor's wife or a lady in the church or somebody will bake a little bit of bread and you'll buy a bottle of grape juice and you have what you need. But otherwise, no, you have to prepare a complete meal. It's more challenging. So I think it's just I don't think it's a Catholic, it's a matter of the Catholic form of the communion. I think it was just that, I mean, the Catholic form is to say that the biscuit represents is actually has been changed into the flesh of Christ and the wine is changed into the blood of Christ. That's really the issue with the Catholic form of the communion. They regard the bread as a living thing and the wine as a living thing, actually the very life and flesh and blood of Christ. So that's the problem with it. I don't think the size of what you partake of is an issue at all. I don't see how that can be an issue because some people eat a little bit and some people eat a lot. So the size itself, I don't think should matter at all.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that because when you continue the reading, you realize Paul, that is what Paul was actually saying. They misunderstood the whole meaning
Yes.
of the communion and misrepresented what it really meant. So yeah, that makes sense.
Um, and I'll just say something else about the foot washing. Somebody who had a strong disagreement with me about the foot washing because Ellen White says that we should wash one another's feet as a part of the communion service. So, a person disagreed with me very strongly, and he was quoting some of the things Jesus said there. And sometimes, as I was reading what he was saying, I was thinking, well, that's the thing. When you believe something, you read into the Bible what you want it to say, because Jesus says, I have given you an example that you should do as I have done. I've washed your feet. I, your Lord and Master, I've washed your feet. You ought to wash one another's feet. Then he said, if you know these things, happy are you if you do them. Now, I mentioned in the article that I wrote that, from time to time, the Pope will go out and wash people's feet. And as a matter of fact, if you look on the internet, you'll find where he's washing the feet of, I think, some Muslims. And one of the Pope washed the feet of a dozen beggars. Now, Jesus said, if you do these things, you're happy. Do you really believe that if you go and wash the feet of 12 beggars, it will make you happy? Do you believe that by having a ceremony in church where you wash the foot of a brother or a sister, as the case may be, this makes you happy? Is this what Jesus was saying? If you want to be happy, go and take the communion and wash somebody's foot. Is that what he was saying? But how do we read the Bible with such limited understanding? What he was saying is, if you as a Christian develop the habit of serving your brother or your sister, if you develop the habit of serving your brother or your sister in humility, considering yourself to be the least of the brethren, you will be happy. He's not talking about a ceremonial ritual. You go and wash somebody's foot every 3 months. That doesn't make anybody happy. So, although we're not dealing with that this evening, I just brought that into the picture as well, because the more people object to it, I mean, I'm looking at the reasons why people object, and if the Bible reasons are there, we have to consider them. But I don't think I can't see the Bible reasons. I'm seeing more an effort to defend something that somebody said, and because you believe that this is infallible, you're finding a way to make it say what you want it to say. But it's clear to me that the point Jesus was making, I can't remember when last I washed somebody's foot. Okay. I mean, maybe it was the last time we had communion in the church. In Bible times, it was a custom that if somebody came to visit your home, you provided somebody to wash the person's foot. It was a servant was appointed to wash the person's foot. When Jesus went to Simon's house, and the woman came in and she began to wash his feet with her tears and dry them with her hair. And Simon was critical. Jesus said, I came to your house. You didn't provide any water to wash my feet. He criticized Simon's practice because Simon did not treat him like a guest. Because it was a practice in those days to wash somebody's foot. We don't practice that these days. Jesus was saying, if you as Christians wash one another's feet, but you take the statement and what do? You apply it to your situation. How would you wash somebody's foot today? I'll tell you how I could do it, right? I could notice that brother Kevin's lawn needs cutting, and I take my lawnmower and I go and cut his lawn. This is the equivalent of what Jesus is doing. I could come to your home and I decide to wash your dishes for you. Okay? Something a guest doesn't normally do. I had a brother who used to visit us, a good friend of mine, right? he kind of stopped fellowshipping with us because he turned against the message of righteousness by faith. But I always remember that brother. He was so humble when he came to my home. He came to the home, he would wash the dishes. He would take them up and mop up the place. I remember we were on a bus traveling one time. We were going to on some outing, and a child vomited. And before you could blink your eyes, he was up and he had something wiping up the vomit. He was always looking for the lowliest job, the job that you'd have to call somebody, and he would do it while he was there. And it was something that, even though his understanding of truth, he has a problem with understanding things. I'll tell you, because he got into the shepherd rod, and I went to him and talked to him about the message of 1888, and he got out of the shepherd rod. He left it after I heard the message. Then he got into the Reformed Adventist Church, and he got out of it. Then he was in our movement, and then he got upset with me because I started saying things that were contrary to what Ellen White said. And when we got into righteousness by faith, and I criticized Wagner, that was the end of it. He blew up on me one day, and he stopped worshiping with us till he started going back to the Adventist church. But he's still my friend. He still comes by and looks for me and, treats me like a brother. But his mind is not so open. The interesting thing is that this brother, I introduced him to Adventism. He was a Pentecostal. I introduced him to Adventism. And that was way back in the days when we were in college. And one of the things he said to me, you brought me into Adventism and you taught me to respect Ellen White and Wagner. And now you're talking against these things. And he cussed me off that day. And he stopped worshiping with us. But anyway, that's kind of beside the point. The point is that if anybody washed people's feet, that was that brother. As much as I say, boy, he's not so balanced in how he looks at things. But I'll tell you, when it comes to Christian humility, I think this is what Jesus meant when he talked about washing people's feet. He talked about taking the humblest position and serving your brethren in the ways that other people don't. And the way he did it was to wash the disciples' feet, because they had a controversy who would be the greatest. But at the same time, we don't behave this way nowadays. So when I come in the church every 3 months to wash somebody's foot, I'm doing a token ceremony. I'm not showing humility. I'm following a church practice. And Jesus was talking about showing humility. They were the proud people in the church. They wash people's foot, right? They do all kinds of things. They go through the motions. It doesn't make anybody humble. It doesn't make anybody happy. True humility is serving your brothers and sisters with the attitude that I am the least of the brethren. And that brother, to me, is an example of what Jesus meant when he said, if you do these things, happy are you if you do them. So I just wanted to rant a little about that since Sister Nikki brought up the communion, and this thing was kind of like in my mind. Go ahead, Sister Di.
Well, I wanted to ask, how did they get drunk on juice at this supper?
Yes, that's a good question. But the thing is, when it says some of you are drunken, it could mean some of you have already drunk to your full. The word drunken here could be it could mean you have drunk in the past tense, drunken. I'm not sure that he meant some of you are drunk, like intoxicated.
But
But
other versions say it is.
other versions say so.
Brother
Yeah,
David.
No, no,
yeah.
no, no, no. This is I'm not trying to become accommodating here. When you're dealing with Old English, you have to be careful. Let us look at another version and see if.
New King James says one who another one who is hungry, either they're not hungry, and another is drunk. So if they're not drunk, then either they're not hungry.
Let me see. What verse is it, Sister Diane?
21,
Verse
22.
21.
Yeah, 21.
But wine in the Bible is always alcoholic wine.
I mean, there's only one word in the Bible for wine. That
Yes,
one
one word.
word itself, it constitutes alcoholic and non-alcoholic. Only one word. So you really never know. But The fact that they got drunk off of wine, David got drunk. What's his name got drunk? You can't get drunk off of grape juice.
But they
Yeah.
usually specify the grape juice as new wine, isn't it? That means
But
new
Correct.
wasn't
wine.
they
Okay.
drinking wine before they got the juice from Jesus? Jesus
Yeah.
didn't give them wine. I mean, like alcohol wine.
But
Okay.
we know that.
All the versions that I have, they interpret it to mean that one. It means drunk. Okay. All the versions I have interpreted to mean that drunk. So I'm going to accept that
Intoxication drunk. Not
intoxication drunk. I
okay.
look at
Yeah.
the NASB, the NIV, the New English Translation, the Amplified Bible, the English Standard Version, and they all interpret it to say that it means drunk, as in intoxicated. So based on all of these, I'm going to accept that it means drunk. Yeah. So the thing is, this is another issue that I think Adventists insist that the wine that was used biblically is grape juice, and that this is what Jesus used at the Last Supper. The truth is that when we look at the Bible strictly, it's not. I can't say biblically that is what the Bible says. It says wine. As Sister Diane says, it's the same word that is used for wine and for grape juice. Grape juice is considered to be wine. In our day, we distinguish by calling wine the fermented juice, but the Bible doesn't have this distinction. So what we do know is that in the Bible, there are many places where God's people drank wine. And the Bible does not forbid the drinking of wine. It forbids getting drunk, which means it discourages getting drunk, which means that it discourages drinking wine to excess. But there's
Exact. Everything in excess is wrong.
okay. Well, but for me personally, I believe taking any intoxicating drink is excess. That's for me. Okay, I'm not telling anybody else what to do, but I know I used to drink wine and I used to drink rum punch, and I used to, at once or twice, I actually took rum itself. And I know that this is what I've proven for myself. I'm not telling other people what to do. But I find that a Christian needs to be in full control of his senses at all times. And I know that when I went to a party and I was short of speech, I would take a drink of rum punch, or I'd take a glass of wine. And I would have all the lyrics, and I'd be able to say all the things that people found attractive. I'd be able to talk to the girls and all the rest of it. The thing is that when I didn't take it, I was conscious of being foolish. I didn't want to be foolish. When I took it, I lost my inhibitions and I was in danger of behaving in ways where I was not in full control. This is what I've found out. So even though there are things that the Bible permits that we shouldn't do, just like with wine, does the Bible allow a man to have more than one wife? There's nowhere in the Bible that forbids polygamy. Nowhere. And in the New Testament church, men had several wives. And just like how the Bible discourages getting drunk, the Bible also discourages elders and leaders from having more than one wife. But the Bible doesn't forbid it. So I would say I put
It
drinking
doesn't forbid
alcoholic liquor
it,
into the same
but
category.
still you can show in the you can look in the history of those families and see that they weren't good at all. It was really
Sorry,
more
I'm
trouble
not
than
hearing
they
so well.
had.
Claudia, can you speak up a little? I'm not hearing you so well.
I'm saying that the Bible doesn't forbid polygamy, but when you look at the history of those families, you can see the uh, effects of having multiple wives.
Of
And
course.
when Paul talks about choosing elders, he actually specifies that it should better be the husband of only one wife. And as a principle, God didn't create multiple wives for Adam; He created one. So there are
So
still
yeah, so
some
it's
things in the Bible that suggest that God didn't intend polygamy, even though it doesn't forbid it explicitly.
Right. So I'm saying it's the same principle with drinking alcohol, because in the same breath that the Bible says that the elders should be the husband of one wife, it's the same breath where it says not a wine bibber, not given too much wine, and also it should not be greedy for money. So there are things
Right.
that the Bible discourages as a Christian leader, which it does not say is a sin, and it doesn't forbid it. And this is based on the principle that all things are lawful. I can't tell you that it is unlawful based on what the Bible says, but I can tell you all things are not expedient. As Christians, we are to operate on the basis of what is helpful. We don't need a rule or a prohibition to behave sensibly. Brother Tony, you want to say something?
Oh no. Well, I mean, Proverbs 20 tells us that wine is a mocker. We shouldn't even drink it. You know, but see, like you say, it doesn't distinct tells us which one they're talking about, but you can read between the lines. Grape juice is called wine, but strong drink is also called wine.
Yes. And of course, everything is to be taken. As Christians, we're not fools. We have the Spirit of
Right.
God. If I need to take some wine for a headache or because my stomach has a problem, even if it's fermented, I will take it. In other words, we are not under the law. We're not people under an iron rule where we don't have any intelligence or any sense. I mean, that is the way of the legalist. Okay, a rule says so, and you cannot bend it because the rule controls you. But when we are led by the Spirit of God, we have the wisdom to understand and to be balanced about the things we do. We avoid the things that are harmful, but sometimes it comes to the place where we encounter something more harmful. And so a little wine, Paul said to Timothy, you should take a little wine for the stomach's sake. And I don't think there was any distinction about whether it was fermented or unfermented. If it was good for his stomach, take a little, he says. And I think that principle is good for today.
Yeah, Brother David, you just said the
The wine
point.
that Jesus,
Hold on, Sanya.
the
Brother Cliff
wine
is
that
speaking.
Jesus
Hold on, Sanya.
prepared
Hold
at
on.
the wedding.
Hold on. Go ahead, Cliff.
No, I was just gonna say I was just about to interrupt before you said what you just said, and say that when I was when I was locked in that Adventist mindset, just making wine touch my tongue, I felt like I was sinning, and it's the association with the deeds of things like that, and associating that with sin based on what the Adventist Church says it is and what it's not, that gives us this problem of how we deal with things right now. And you just said it clearly how we ought to view it.
Okay, thank you, Brother Cliff. Go ahead, Sanya.
I was just saying, I don't think the wine that Jesus himself served at the wedding was not fermented in the sense of taste, at least, because of the comments that they gave after they tasted it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. As you said before, it is the abuse of it that is wrong.
Okay. Um.
Yes, Brother.
Yes, Brother Ayayi, and then Brother Arthur.
Well, I don't know, and I wouldn't. I think this about the wine Jesus gave at the wedding being fermented. There are many reasons that we can also say that it's not fermented, because fermentation has to go through a certain process, and if you have a palm wine, palm wine. I think you know what is palm wine.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have it fresh, it's not fermented,
Hmm.
and it has to stay for some time. A new wine, as Jesus called it, is not fermented. New wine, if you get it immediately, but if you put it there in something and you keep it for a while, it will get fermented. So, well, I agree with what he said. Uh,
Go ahead, brother Aye.
yes, I agree uh, because I'm changing
Somebody
my.
mic is unmuted.
Mhm.
Yeah, brother Arthur is unmuted. He's waiting to go next, but we're hearing brother Aye. All right. I I I I I agree with you, brother Aye. To be honest, I mean, none of us can prove what kind of wine Jesus made. The truth is that I don't know if it is the most important thing in the world. And as you said, there are reasons that we can offer to say it was unfermented, and there are reasons some people might offer to say it was fermented. To me, I don't know why it would be very important. I don't think it is important. What is important is that we understand the principles so that in our life we can exercise the proper principles. What I know, just before I let Brother Arthur speak, what I know is that sometimes people allow their preferences to decide how they approach the Bible. I know that when I used to take fermented alcoholic drinks, I liked wine. I liked wine, and I mean, I'm not saying I will never drink fermented wine again. I mean, I never liked rum. I used to enjoy rum punch, but I liked wine. But like I say, for the 46 years I've been a Christian, I've never touched strong drink again because I don't need it. Why would I take it and I don't need it? I mean, and besides, like I used to smoke marijuana. They say marijuana. I mean, I know how it can damage you if you smoke it after a while, but a little puff of it won't hurt you. But anything that distorts your judgment, I believe as a Christian, anything that distorts your judgment, you are jeopardizing yourself if you do it. Sober, we be stupid enough sometimes. Sober, much more if you impair your judgment. I don't want to find that I take a little bit of something and then I make some kind of remark to a lady that I shouldn't make, or I say something to a brother that is inappropriate, or even to my wife. I want to know that what I'm doing, I'm in full control and understanding of what I'm doing. So that is me, okay? And I believe that as Christians, we have the Spirit of God. We should be sensible in what we're doing. So that's just my thought. So, Brother Arthur, sorry for cutting in before you.
I endorse every word you just said. That's the crux of the matter. At the end of the day, anything that beclouds our sensibilities ought to be shunned. We need to have our senses intact all the time. And can I tell you something more? I used to be a police officer for 14 years, and I've seen certain things where colleagues of mine would often drink and what it does to them. They would often sit at the bar and they would drink. And two twos, their senses are out of square. I've seen colleagues also who've been killed because I think if their minds were properly aligned, they would have been more alert and they probably would not have been in that position. Anything that is going to becloud our sensibilities ought to be left alone. If 1 ounce of wine, you have that and all is good, fine. But if 2 ounces becloud your sensibilities, leave it alone. We must be sober all the time. And as you rightly say, if even when we don't take any wine, we can be acting as though we are drunk. It's best you leave it alone altogether.
All right, thank you, Brother Arthur. Sister Diane.
I was thinking in terms of that verse that they were talking about, a little wine for your stomach. It's almost like yesterday I got sick to my stomach because I had taken a bunch of pills, not drugs, but pills on an empty stomach. And you know what that's like when you do that? I got sick to my stomach. You know, I had to upchuck and everything, and it lasted for days. And I was looking for something, and I needed something to settle. So I was gonna buy like a ginger ale because usually those kinds of uh, carbonated things kind of releases it. But I couldn't find one small enough. All they had was, so I had to suffer it out because I couldn't find it. But I think that's the point that he's making about the little wine, because grape juice is not going to do that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Sister Di. You wanted to say something again, Brother Tony? Oh, your mic was just on. All right.
Nah,
So
well, you
anyway,
know, I was gonna say that, you know, I agree with what you said because right now I'm missing a gallbladder because of years of drinking alcohol, and I laid on the deathbed with a pancreatitis, and that was from drinking alcohol. So I wouldn't tell nobody, and I'm sure Jesus he would never give no one alcohol, never.
okay. And the last thing I would say is, you know, the alcohol, smoking, certain things are addictive over time. So, you know, if you even take a little of it, if you begin to practice it, it will become addictive. I have a brother right now who is addicted to smoking. My last brother, addicted to smoking. And I mean, he every time he gets any money, he spends he's unable to keep any money. Smoking, and he drinks. Sometimes I say he's not drinking anymore, but I think he is, and then he's gambling. He's addicted. And addiction, for those of us who have never been addicted, we don't understand that we have addiction, but addiction is like something that takes you over. Without Christ or some very special treatment, it's very hard to overcome an addiction. You know, so all in all, to me, it is silly to gamble with something that can have a negative effect on you. Even you know, the government will take away your license if they find that you have been drinking and driving. If it's dangerous to drink and drive, I would think it's dangerous to drink and be a Christian. You know, and somebody will say, well, it depends on how much you drink. And I agree to some extent. But you know, when I started drinking, the strange thing I noticed the first time, as I found myself stepping, my knees were up I was stepping high. I always saw those drunk men on the road walking, and they were lifting their knees up to their chest when they were walking, and I couldn't understand why. And when I got, I took a little bit more than I should. I found myself walking with my knees high, and I was wondering, why am I doing this? Then I realized that the ground was 2 feet closer. I was seeing the ground 2 feet closer. So I was lifting my feet to be able to put it where the ground was. And of course, the ground was 2 feet further. That's why I kept stumbling with each step, because I kept lifting my knees. And where I thought the ground was, I missed, and I actually, my feet went down much further. So even physically, it impairs your judgment, you know. So anyway, that's like a little bit of the topic of where we intended to go this evening. But
Brother David,
yes, Brother Arthur.
one final quick
And
point. Um, when,
Hold on a
when
minute,
we
sorry, hold on.
when I used to be a police, there's one way that we could take and find out if a person is drunk. And you know what it was? Without even using a breathalyzer on them, just ask them to walk a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
They can't walk a straight line. So
Yeah,
it's not good to be drunk.
yeah, it impairs your balance and your judgment.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Claudia.
um, I just watched a while ago a medical presentation, and physiologically, wine is processed as a poison wood.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, very interesting. So the real benefit of drinking strong drink is that it has the effect of a drug on you. In other words, it gives you a feel good feeling, and it mutes reality. It mutes reality. It masks reality and makes you feel good by putting you in a non-realistic state. generally speaking, I think I'm right when I say this, that this is the benefit of using strong drink. So I think there's good reason for Christians to be wary of it, even if the Bible doesn't straight out condemn it. Brother Ian and then Sister Leanne. Oh, your mic was accidentally on.
No, I was asking what did Claudia say? I didn't hear what she said.
She said that she was watching a documentary where they were examining alcohol, or was it wine, as a kind of poison. They were treating it the same way that they would treat analyzing poison. Go ahead, Sister Leanne.
No, what exactly happened was that
Sorry.
I was watching the documentary on how sugar is treated internally by the liver, and they showed that sugar and alcohol are treated both like poisons. They are
No, it wasn't sugar. It wasn't just sugar.
processed by the liver in the
Fructose.
same way.
It wasn't sugar. It wasn't just sugar. 'Cause the body naturally has sugar. It was fructose. The whole documentary was about
Yes,
fructose.
yes,
Right.
fructose. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
a type of sugar, not all sugar, but yeah.
Okay, so
So it
fructose.
showed that alcohol is treated like a poison, and fructose follows the same path in the organism when it's
Okay,
digested.
so it's the liver that
Another.
treats this way.
Yes.
Okay, okay,
That it says that alcohol is metabolized in the brain. Fructose is metabolized, I think, in the liver. But there are a lot of things that, for example, one doctor pointed out to me, and I checked it out after. You can actually poison yourself drinking water. If you have too much of it, it can become a poison to you. So the bottom line to me is moderation. It is temperance. It is doing things not in the excess. Do it according to proper use. So everything, a lot of things that we take normally, even food, can become a poison to us if we eat too much of one thing. There are several kinds of foods that if we eat too much of it, it can affect our health, and it can even make us drunk. Because yeah,
right.
so
But some
it's
things it
moderation.
takes a little to do that, and some things it takes a lot to do that.
For alcohol, it doesn't say that it depends on quantity, how it treats. It's always like that
Hmm.
because it just detects it has a certain structure, and it's not a difference on the quantity. The body treats it like a poison because it is a poison, nothing useful in it, in
Okay,
alcohol.
Sister Leanne, go ahead.
Okay. Well, in my years of studying natural healing, yeah, that's so true that alcohol is a sugar itself, refined sugar of any kind, is a toxic poison to the body. And it especially contributes to cancer and deadly disease. So, I mean, alcohol is very full of sugar. So all those things are anything in excess. But when you wake up with a hangover and you have that throbbing headache, you actually feel what it does to the brain because it dehydrates the brain and it can cause brain damage. Anyway, that wasn't what I wanted to say. What I was going to ask is when I joined the Adventist church, and I don't know if it's just an Adventist thing, but I was told that the reason that Christ refused the vinegar that was passed to him on a sponge was because it had alcohol and it was fermented. Is there any validity to that? And I mean, why would he if it was just a sip to wet his mouth or alleviate his thirst? Does anybody even know anything about that?
I suppose we can speculate. I mean, I know that I know what you were told as an Adventist is something that Ellen White said. But the thing is, I have never once in my life I took, I think it was apple cider vinegar, because I had a terrible belly ache once in my life, and that it was so bad that Sabbath that I couldn't go to worship, and somebody came and told me that I needed to take apple cider vinegar, and so I took it, and actually it made me worse afterwards. Never really seem to help at all. It increased my belly ache. But anyway, I don't remember the vinegar being a pleasant taste or anything pleasant to take either. So I think if I am thirsty and somebody offers me vinegar, after I taste it, I don't want any more. I mean, it's not just a matter of that I say, okay, this is alcohol, because the thing is, the person just pushed up a sponge, and for you to sip a little bit, it wouldn't really do that much harm. But the Bible says after I tasted it, he didn't take any more. I'm not sure if they were trying to mock him. If you are thirsty, why would somebody give you vinegar? You know, maybe it's a way of increasing the torture that he's going through. And so they put up something on a sponge, and he's thinking somebody is being kind, but the person is really being unkind to him. So he takes a taste and he doesn't take any more. For me, this seems the reason why he didn't take any more, because I don't think he had any desire to drink vinegar for any reason or whatever. And if he was thirsty, I don't know if vinegar would really help at all. So I don't see any need to really speculate about why he didn't take the vinegar. It just seems natural that if he wanted water and they gave him something else, he just didn't drink it.
You know what? Maybe they were trying to get him to act out of his, you know, to act differently. Because if somebody gave me vinegar when I'm thirsty, what would be the first thing I would do? Spit it out and probably curse them out. Then if Jesus would have done something like that, he would have messed up his mission. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm sure
But
Satan.
I was reading about just what Tony was talking about, and the Romans gave everybody they hung on the cross. That was just a thing that they gave to people when they said they were thirsty. It wasn't that they was picking on him or giving him something, because the Romans didn't have any. They was just doing this because of the Jews, and so they just gave him what they usually give everybody else that's hanging on the cross.
They,
That they call it gall or something.
What was
may
it?
I add something, David?
Yes, go ahead, Wayne.
I noticed when he was given the vinegar and when it was all done, he himself said, "It is finished." You know, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, you know, what is prophesied in the Psalm. David in the Psalm says they gave him vinegar to drink, and now they gave him that. Now he now realized everything that he came to fulfill was fulfilled, and now he says it is finished. That is the last straw. That's the last thing I had to fulfill. So I saw that giving him of the vinegar as another part of the fulfillment of the prophecy that truly he is the Messiah. That's how I see
Okay.
it.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. I mean, I'm just a little curious as to what was the medical, physiological reason why they would have given everybody vinegar. There must have been some reason why the Romans did it. It must either be to alleviate their suffering, which I don't think the Romans were interested in, or to make their pain more intense, or to make them more uncomfortable, which seems to be what the Romans would be interested in. So whether it was given to Jesus alone or to everybody who was on the cross, the Romans must have had a reason for doing it. And I tend to think it was an unpleasant reason. And if it was that, I could understand why he didn't take any more, because it probably was something intended for a negative reason, you know. Anyway, I guess that's we're speculating a little bit, but that's the best we can come to on that. Now, the intention this evening was to actually do Matthew 24, and what I'm going to do is at least let's do some background examination of the chapter and see if we can at least make a start on it, and maybe we could finish next week. But let's bring up our screen here and actually go to the Bible. All right. So Matthew 24 is where we're going to go today. And I will bring up on the other side Luke chapter 21. There are actually 3 chapters in the Bible. There are 3 passages in the Bible that correspond to each other. One of them is Matthew 24. The other one is Mark chapter 13. And the other one is Luke 21. Now I don't want to put 3 screens on the board because 3 screens is going to take up too much space. So I'm going to actually use Matthew and Luke, and we can do some comparison as we go along. Luke is interesting. They say that Luke is the best. Luke was a historian, they say. And they say that the book of Luke deals with more historical facts than Mark and Matthew. But in many ways, I think Luke, some things in Luke are a bit less precise. Matthew was actually one of the disciples. Luke was a Gentile. And I think Luke got his record of the life of Jesus. He put it together from different Christians who told him the story. And he put it all together, and that is how the book of Luke came about. But if you notice what is in Matthew 24, you find a piece of it in Luke chapter 17. And you find a piece of it in Luke chapter 21. But in Matthew and Mark, in Matthew you have everything in chapter 24, and in Mark you have everything in chapter 13. But like I said, Luke kind of breaks it up. There's a piece of it in chapter 17, and then there's a piece of it in Luke 21. Anyway, we're going to primarily focus on Matthew 24 and look at the background to what happened. It says in verse 1, and Jesus went out and departed from the temple. And his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. If you go to Luke, the equivalent chapter, it says, as some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts. So it's his disciples, but in the book of Luke, it only says some spoke to him about it. In the book of Matthew, it tells you it was his disciples. It says they showed him the buildings of the temple, but in Luke, it says that they showed him how it was adorned with goodly stones and how people were bringing their gifts. Now, it was in this context, in verse 2, it says, and Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. So, this is kind of typical of the way that Jesus taught his lessons. You might wonder, why did Jesus suddenly begin to tell them now this long history? Jesus used their state of mind as an introduction to bring something in that he wanted to say. If you notice, when Nicodemus came to Jesus, he says, Master, we know that you're a teacher sent from God. He came to Jesus and he wanted to start a conversation, but he started a conversation saying, we know you are a teacher. He was trying to, I don't know if he was trying to flatter Jesus or what he wanted, but Jesus used the opportunity and immediately spoke to him of what was in his heart. It's like the woman at the well. The woman, he asked the woman for water. The woman said, you're asking water from me, a Samaritan? And immediately he used the opportunity to tell her that she needed the living water that he could give. He introduced her to spiritual things based on a physical situation. And this is what Jesus is doing here. I suppose maybe for a long time he wanted to explain to them the prophecies of the future. But here was the opportunity, because they came to show him the buildings of the temple. Their eyes were on the glory of Israel and how marvelously, the God had blessed the nation, and there were these buildings. I suppose, if you want to think of an equivalent today, it could be somebody coming to you and telling you how great is the Catholic Church, or how wonderful is the Adventist Church. And immediately you use it as an opportunity to begin to give a Bible study and to show them deeper things. Like, for example, do you know what Jesus says about the churches of today? He says it is lukewarm and about to be spit out of his mouth. You use the opportunity to say something that the person needs. And that's what Jesus did. So they show him this magnificent temple, and they think he's going to say, yes, God has blessed Israel. She's the queen of nations. She's the jewel of kingdoms. She's the apple of his eye. Instead, Jesus says the most startling and the most unexpected thing. He says, you are looking at all these things. Let me tell you something. There's not one stone resting on another stone that shall not be thrown down. And I can imagine that when he says it, there is a dead silence. His disciples are flabbergasted. None of the rabbis or the Pharisees or the scribes, none of them have ever told them this before. Nobody has ever mentioned this before. And so they are silent until they get to the Mount of Olives and they sit down. And when they sit down now, it says, as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately. The crowd has died down, the people are gone, and the disciples are with him alone. And they say, tell us, when shall these things be? First thing they want to know is the timing. Okay, I think wanting to know the time is natural. Before my mother died, she died at, what was it, 97? I think she was 97 or 96. But every time I went to look for that old lady, she was in bed for the last 3 years. She could not walk. She was bedridden. And at the end, she was pretty much blind. But every time I went there, you know what she would ask me? Do you think Jesus will come before I die? One blessed thing is that it was all that was on her mind at the end. All that was on her mind was Jesus and the coming of Jesus. And every time I came, she wanted me to have Bible studies with the people who were in the household. She was obsessed with the coming of Jesus, and I was really blessed to see the state of her mind in the law at the end. But anyway, this is what normally comes to our mind when we hear of religious catastrophe. Russia is attacking Ukraine. Is this the beginning of Armageddon? Is this the start of a third world war? Is this the start of the end? They shut down the world and they are vaccinating everybody. Is this a final crisis? Is this the introduction of the mark of the beast? We are always anxious to know about timing. And this is not something new. It's perennial for God's people. So they came, and Jesus says, look here, the temple that you admire, it's going to come down. And right away they think, this can only be the end of the world. There's no way this great temple that God told Israel to build, and that is the center of our worship system, there's no way it is coming down unless it is the end of the world. Kind of like how all of us would feel if we saw the Vatican going up in flames, or if we saw Russia bomb the White House. You would know that that is the end of the world, or all of us would think that way for sure. So you would say, if somebody who we can depend on predicted something like this, you would think that must be the end of the world. And so they said, when shall these things be? Tell us. And they link three things together. When shall these things be? Number one. Number two, what shall be the sign of your coming? That's number two. And number three is kind of like tied into number one and two, but they didn't realize it was a different event. And of the end of the world. They thought all these things were the same event. So they asked, like, they combined all their questions in one, right? Tell us, when shall these things be? And furthermore, what shall be the sign of your coming and this end of the world? Because for them, the destruction of the temple must be the end of the world. Now we know that the fulfillment of this statement, not one stone left upon another, it was fulfilled 2,000 years ago, almost 2,000 years ago. Actually, about 2,000 and about 1,950 years, somewhere around about that, or 49 years, somewhere around about that. Okay, so it was a long time ago, and it wasn't the end of the world. But they thought, because their understanding was limited, and many times I think our understanding is limited too. I've learned that when people talk about the end of the world, I've learned to be careful, because it has always been coming. And because God's people are anxious for the end of the world, sometimes we tend to ignore some of the things that need to happen. And we look at the things that are happening and we jump the gun. And that's what these disciples did. They jumped the gun. They concluded, so nobody told them that the destruction of the temple meant the end of the world, but they concluded it must be. Kind of like how the early Adventists concluded that the cleansing of the sanctuary must be the end of the world. You make an assumption and you jump on the assumption. It's dangerous to make an assumption. We have to make sure that what we are thinking ties in with the rest of the word of God. So they thought that the destruction of the temple was the end of the world, and they wanted to know, if he knows about it, who better to tell us when and how than him? So they asked a question, and Jesus answered their question. Remember, they asked, there are three things in their question. Now, if it were you or me, we would have said, let me tell you first of all, the destruction of the temple will not be the end of the world. The destruction of the temple will be actually 2,000 years before the world comes to an end. That's what we would have done. But Jesus never gave his people information or a message that was focused on time. And I think that has something to do with the psychology of human beings. Okay, I remember one time Jesus saw, at the end, Jesus said to Peter, when you are old, they're going to tie your hands and carry you where you don't want to go. Peter looked around and he saw John following them, and he said, Lord, and what shall this man do? Jesus says, if I want him to live till I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Jesus never responded by telling Peter what would happen to John. And it's kind of like saying, you need to understand that in this world, our place is to follow the Lord and not to make assumptions and not to care about anything other than to follow the Lord. Now that I am just about 70 years, I'm better able to appreciate and understand that, and I'm more careful than I used to be. But anyway, it says Jesus answers. All right, he has to give them the answer to three questions in one mouthful. All right, and he's not telling them that you're asking three different things relating to different times. He's using because what Jesus is saying, Jesus knows. Was it for the benefit of the apostles, of the disciples? By the time the temple was actually destroyed, many of those disciples were already dead. The temple was destroyed in AD 70. James was beheaded early in the history of the church. Stephen was already stoned to death. I don't know how long it took for many of the other disciples to be put to death. I know that John survived until about AD 95, but the temple was destroyed in AD 70. And by that time, many of them were dead. So this question of when it would happen had no relevance to them. The things that Jesus is saying here, the answers that he gave, were not primarily for their benefit. It was primarily for the benefit of those of us who live at the end of time. So this is why the details or the timing was not important for them to understand, because it's a prophecy of the end times, and it was not something that would be relevant to them. It's like when John had the book of Revelation. Who in John's time? I mean, the Catholics believe that the book of Revelation was fulfilled during the time of the apostles. Okay, crazy. They think that the beast was the Emperor Nero. I think they think the beast was the Emperor Nero. And the Jews believe that many of the prophecies of Isaiah and Jeremiah were fulfilled in their time. And some of them did have a partial fulfillment. But many of these prophecies, most of them apply to the end of time, to the end of the world. And so they are most relevant for us who live at the end of time. And that is one reason why many of the times that are involved, the time periods, there's no mention of these time periods. Jesus just goes ahead and the prophets just go ahead and they tell us the events and they leave it up to us, led by the Spirit of God, to dissect and to break down these prophecies so we can understand the timing of these things. So Jesus starts by saying in verse 4, Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. So the first thing he does, he warns them against deception. Why? I think because we need to be careful about it. Okay? He doesn't just say be careful about deception in a general sense. He's looking at the stumbling blocks and the dangers that will exist for his people. And he says, be careful. Why should we be careful? Because deception is going to be a primary element when it comes to the end of the world. Now, granted, I think when you look at what he says here, this deception, this need to be careful about deception is not primarily for the year 2022. It goes way back to even before Jerusalem was destroyed. And I'm going to show you that. Look at what he says. He says, for many shall come in my name saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Now we can see a fulfillment of this, right? I know Brother Howard had a presentation in which he has a list of several of these false Christ that exist today. There's a man in Russia who claims to be Jesus Christ. There's Sun Moon. I think he's dead by now. Sun Moon in Korea who claims to be the Christ. There's a man in Florida. I don't know if he's dead by now. He claimed to be Christ. And the reason I mention these people is because millions of people, I mean millions of people around the world have embraced these people as Christ. There's one of them in Australia too. I don't mean people who are crackpots and you have 5 little people following behind them. There was a man in Jamaica. He called himself the hotter ball. He was always standing and looking up at the sun. And he dressed himself in a grass skirt. He dressed like the picture of those Indians who used to live in Jamaica way back in the days of Columbus, the Arawaks. He dressed like one, and he would never ride a bicycle or take a car. Sometimes you would see him on the road walking for miles. I think he used to walk from Mandeville to, and he was barefoot, Mandeville to Maypen sometimes, which is like 26 miles, and he would walk all the way. He never took any transportation, and he claimed to be the original Jamaican. But just because of his strangeness, people started following him. You know, he had locks. He got a group of people too who started following him around and belonging to his little fellowship, and they call themselves the Hotter Balls. But the thing is, I don't know what happened to them. They kind of disappeared. But the thing is, he had a few little people, 5 people, maybe 10. I don't think it was as many as 10. But crazy people, you think they normally don't have a lot of followers. But these people I'm talking about, Sun Moon and the others, they have millions of followers. These are legitimate false Christs who deceive many. But I think, based on the context of what Jesus says, this is something that started way back in the time of the apostles. You remember when Paul was arrested in the book of Acts. Let me see if I can find the actual verse. I don't know if you remember what the Roman. Let me see if I can find it. in Acts 21 and verse 38. Let me find it quickly. Okay, look in the right panel. You see that there were movements in the time of Jesus which were trying to overthrow the Romans. It says, as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, May I speak unto thee? Who said, Canst thou speak Greek? Art not thou that Egyptian which before these days madest an uproar and leddest out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? Here was somebody who was an Egyptian, apparently in Israel, and he claimed to be some kind of deliverer, and 4,000 people followed him. So also when Gamaliel was talking to the Sanhedrin about the disciples, he says, remember this person that led so many people, and he came to nothing. So be careful what you are doing with these men, because if this is of God, we cannot overthrow it. So what I'm saying is that you had people in all ages who claimed to be deliverers. And the word Messiah or Christ means the anointed one. Somebody who is anointed by God to deliver God's people. So there have been people in all ages who claim to be deliverers or claim to be Christ. So this started from way back in the days of the apostles. And I think Jesus starts there because he says in verse 6. Look at what he says in verse 6. After he talks about these false Christs. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Now, people quote this all the time. It was one of the things I always heard quoted even before I became a Christian. Wars and rumors of wars. In my lifetime, there has not been a single day upon this planet where there has not been a war taking place somewhere. In my lifetime. And I live in a time of relative peace. But as far as I can remember, always there was a war taking place somewhere since I was born. And people were always using this as an indication of the end. But look at what Jesus says. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled. So don't be alarmed when you hear about wars. Why? For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So if we believe what Jesus says, wars and rumors of wars is a sign that it is not yet the end. Can you think of a verse in the Bible that complements this one? All right, I'm asking a hard question, but let me show you the verse that I'm thinking of. It just came to me. All right, look at this verse. You know it very well. 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 3. When does it say Jesus will come? It says, for when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. That's interesting because according to Paul, it's not when you see war that is the end. It's when you see peace that it's the end. That's an interesting thing. I mean, I didn't think of this before, but when I just looked at what Jesus says, when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, the end is not yet. So if we understand what he's saying, while you see wars and rumors of wars, you can know that it's not quite the end yet. Because the end comes, according to Paul, when they say peace and safety. In other words, the crisis for God's people will take place in a time when the world is at peace. It's a time when the nations are at peace with each other, where they reach some kind of peace and safety. Then they begin to persecute God's people. And then now the end comes upon them with the 7 last plagues and the coming of Jesus. Yes, Sister Di, go ahead.
Would that be would the Antichrist be the one when he comes on the scene to bring peace to all the chaos that's going on? Is that
I,
when he probably comes on
I,
the scene?
I think that's what we can conclude, that the Antichrist is the one who brings some kind of peace And this peace is a harbinger of the persecution against God's people. I mean,
It's short-lived. It's at the time when the kings have their what's that one we did in Revelation with
they,
yeah,
they
that 1 hour.
yeah. And when you say if is it the Antichrist, I'm thinking about it because the Antichrist is supposed to be a religious figure. He's supposed to be a religious figure, but in my understanding, that the time of peace and safety, well, I know there's a big question mark about it because most of us have been educated to believe that the time of peace and safety is a time of peace and safety because there will seem to be a unifying of religion. Religion will seem to have brought the world to peace. That's the traditional belief. Based on my examination of the book of Revelation, I've come to the conclusion that the last conflict will come about because the world more or less will have tried to eliminate religion. My understanding is that the last peace and safety will be because the world has come to a place where they think where godlessness has brought the world to a place where they come to some kind of universal unity, and they feel that the only obstruction left is religion. So it will be safety among the nations, but it will not be safety for God's people or for Babylon, because we see that Babylon also is going to be destroyed by the 10 horns. But there's a kind of unity and a kind of peace. Babylon is involved in this peace and safety movement. So the Antichrist might probably be involved in this peace and safety movement until a certain point in time when they turn against Babylon.
I say, Brother David, the the thing that they're trying to do, coming against religion, especially Christianity, that's what's happening now. The push is against religion and especially Christianity, right?
Yes. Yes.
So the Antichrist, because there's a new God that they're going to serve, which is science, the same as it was with the atheistic thing that happened in France with the French Revolution. They brought in, they want to get rid of Christianity, they want to get rid of religion, but look what they set up in its place. So the Antichrist, well, don't have to be religious in the sense that we're thinking, but just the fact that you hold to someone's ideal or ideology, you worship it when you are subscribed to it. So if he's atheistic and he's getting rid of Christianity and you're worshiping this idea, that's a religion in itself, sort of, because that's what happened in the French Revolution. They idolized what was it? That lady, and they called her, what was it?
Reason. The goddess of
Reason.
yeah.
All right, so now they're going to have the goddess of science, right?
Quite
So,
very likely. Very, very likely scenario.
yeah, that's
Now,
what I'm thinking. I don't know.
I'm going to look at the two verses following, and then we're going to stop after those verses. So he says, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So what I'm trying to say is that it's clear that when we see these things happening, they are not the end. Jesus says they are the beginning. He said they were the beginning. Okay. Now it's true, as I said, that this is almost universally true for the past 2,000 years. There has always been nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom. But I think we can also see that we could apply this. We could say that there is a secondary meaning. What do I mean by this? I think that in the last century, in the 20th century, there have been two of the greatest wars that the world has ever seen. I don't think there's ever been a time in the history of the planet when you had wars like the 1914 war and the one in 1945. So I think in this sense, we can say that these are the beginning of sorrows in terms of the end of time. Okay? Even though we had wars back in the days of the apostles, and let me just put something in context here. If you were a Jew or you were one of the disciples, one of these apostles, or a member of the early church who lived in AD 70, you read this passage and you saw the Roman armies coming against Jerusalem. Verse 7 would be in the forefront of your mind. It says, nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places. These are the beginning of sorrows. If I were a Jew, and I would have lived in this in the Palestine area, I would have seen the famine that was brought about by the incursion of the Roman armies. We're told that in this siege of Jerusalem, women ate their own children. A donkey's head was sold for so much money. Rats were eaten. People ate their own sandals, the leather from their sandals. It was there was war, there was famine, and I suppose there were also earthquakes. So if you were a believer, you look at this, but then you look at verse 18. Jesus says, all these are the beginning of sorrows. So if you were a Christian, you would have known this is not the end of the world. But I think if you were not a Christian, you might have concluded this has to be the end of the world. 1 million Jews perish. Their blood runs in the streets of Jerusalem like water in the gutter. Surely this is the end of the world, because these are the people that God has chosen to be his people. He has set them up. This destruction has to be the end of the world. This is how the normal Jew would think. But because the Christian has listened to Jesus, he knows these are the beginning of sorrows. So, because there's still quite a bit there's still a lot to go through in the chapter. This is like a natural break. I'm going to stop at this point, and we will continue next week. So we stop at verse 8, and we'll pick up on verse 9 next week. Let me pause and just give a moment in case there's anything that anybody wants to say. Any point you want to make or any question you want to ask before we conclude? Sister Leanne, go ahead.
Seems like we are possibly coming into a worldwide famine. If it seems like the governments of the world are causing that to happen, which is something I've never really, I mean, most of us have never gone hungry for a day or two, much less thought about real scarcity of food. And it's kind of I mean, well, there's going to be a lot going on besides that, but yeah, it's kind of foreboding to think about what may be very soon upon us.
Yes, it's a hard thing to say, but I think that if there really are hard times coming on, hard times is relative. All right, I remember in the 1970s there was a Jamaican prime minister who was trying to take us into the road of socialism. He was trying to make us plant our own food, stop importing foreign goods, and so on. And I remember many Jamaicans thought it was a time of trouble, right? Because we couldn't get cornflakes, we couldn't get American apples, we couldn't get any of that stuff in the supermarket. We had to be eating bananas and yam and cornmeal. We had to be eating Jamaican food. And for many Jamaicans, this was a time of trouble. I know that for me, it was never an issue, because I grew up eating yams and bananas and sweet potato, and there are things you grow here. And because these people couldn't get cornflakes and grapes and apples, look here, they undermined that prime minister. They took their money and they went away to to America, and it was really an interesting time. They blame that prime minister until now, and they say he destroyed the Jamaican economy. He had to change because they never stopped pressuring him, the bigger countries, primarily America, until he had to reverse his policy and open up the countries. Today, people hardly buy anything Jamaican. They buy even imported onions, imported garlic, imported bananas, imported water. In a place that is called the land of wood and water, they import water just because they compelled us to open up this thing they call free trade and free market. Can you imagine buying water to drink in Jamaica? Goodness gracious. But it's because of what they call the open market, okay? And all it does is make a little country like Jamaica suffer because we buy everything and nobody buys everything from us. We are bound to. But what I'm saying is, places where people are accustomed to living in a challenging way, they won't feel the famine that much. Or they won't feel it any different because they have been accustomed to living this way. It's places where people are accustomed to living a certain luxurious lifestyle that they will feel it. You know, I've been to America, and the first thing that impressed me the first time I went to America was the lorries on the road. I travel on the highways. I just saw this stream of what do you call them? Trailers. Is that what they call them? Just this stream, this never-ending stream, just coming at you as back and forth, back and forth. I had to ask the person who was taking me. I mean, I traveled from up in Illinois all the way down to Arizona. I traveled through New Mexico, Texas, which I was just blown away by all those trucks on the road. And when I asked, what are they carrying? Where are they going? They said they're carrying food to the cities, food and goods. And I thought, endlessly? There's no end to it. And it was while I was in America, I realized something. I realized that if the supplies ever get cut off, everybody in the cities will be in terrible problems. The other thing I noticed is that many places in America you cannot grow food. You grow a garden in your yard, and the community council comes and tells you you're defacing the community. They come and they take up your garden. Brother Arthur used to live in Miami. They came and they cut down his orange trees because of the Florida orange plantations. He is not allowed to have oranges because maybe it might where it might affect the plantation business. They cut down his orange trees. Some places you're not allowed to grow things in your yard. I can understand why if you live certain places, you're going to feel the famine if things break down a little bit. But anyway, that's a little bit beside the point. We are really, I think there's going to be rumors of wars and famines and so on again in the last days. What I want to say is that these have always been a feature of the world, and they are not necessarily the sign of the end. That's what Jesus was saying. These things are not necessarily the signs of the end because they will come and they will go. Yes, Sister Diane. Yes.
We've had famines around the world in places like Africa and stuff, and those things were contrived by colonizers to a certain degree because of their stuff that they do. But here in this country, it's going to hurt the West. It's going to hurt this beast system really bad because most people here live hand to mouth constantly. They have enough that they can run to the store and get some more. That's why when the things were bad, when things financially were bad, McDonald's, those fast food places thrive. McDonald's went to the dollar menu and you could get anything for $1. So the poorest people were still eating. They were eating that poison that was killing them and their children because you could get anything you wanted for $1. But what I'm saying is here, America has been paying farmers for years, but last year was a big time where they paid them to not farm. Okay, they do that often, but last year it was a big deal. And now, what I read, and I've got all of these articles, so I know it's true that 18 food processing facilities have burnt down in this country in the last 6 months. 18 food processing centers. So that can't be a coincidence. being that they have an agenda, being that he's buying up, certain people are buying up farmlands and processing fake meat and telling you, this blueprint of whatever they call part of their agenda. So the fact that you see the shelves have been, slack in this country. I mean, the big chains, the stores' shelves are slack, and they were slack last summer, and they started. So to say it's Putin's fault is a lie because it started before the war. So there's an agenda to cause famine, but I'm saying it's really going to hurt. You don't have to eat luxuriously that this is going to hurt. It's going to hurt the average person, who does not make any plans for tomorrow, who only, like I said, eat today for today and hand to mouth because it's convenient, but it's not going to be convenient. And that's going to cause serious problems here in this country.
Yeah. When you look at what has happened to the world, it's a frightening thing, really. The small farmers have been absorbed by the huge farming corporations. People have been brainwashed to leave the farms and to work in the cities and to depend on the supermarket and to depend on somebody to provide the food, the packaged food, and even the natural food. Somebody grows it, and it normally grows in a huge. You don't have little corner plantations and hardly any corner stores anymore. The point is, if the problem with these huge corporations is if one thing breaks down, the people have nothing. You have no option because nobody is growing corn in his backyard. At least it's still not quite so bad in Jamaica. I can go to a field and I can ask a farmer to sell me some, or even to trade me some sweet potatoes or some yams or tomatoes or something. There are little plots, maybe half acre, quarter acre, all over the place in my community. Thank God they have not quite destroyed those yet. If it comes to that, I can. If there's no longer the trucks stop running and the ships stop running and I can't get American wheat and American cornflakes and so on, I can live, right? I can plant banana trees in my backyard. I can go over my neighbor here next door and ask him for a few fingers of banana. But when you depend on when the system is set up, when I think about it, I am frightened for people. I mean, if everything is coming from the huge corporations, and I know that sometimes they find a little salmonella or E. coli and some lettuce, and they have to go through all the supermarkets in America and take back everything because everything is coming from one place. If they just hit the big corporations, or like happened in the recent situation with the pandemic, okay? Everybody controls the news. Everybody controls social media. Facebook says, if you say this, you're gone. Twitter says, if you say this, you're gone. The news, if you say this, people, they try to shut you down. You are locked into a box where anybody can turn the key and shut you out. And you have no option but to die or to disappear. The whole world is closing in. A system is being created where, if you ever read Animal Farm, a system is being created where all of us are just ciphers in a system that is run by a computerized system controlled by a few people at the top. I'm not your typical conspiracy theorist, but I have eyes to see. And I see the potential, and I see why the mark of the beast is going to be a reality. Anybody who could have asked the question, how can the mark of the beast happen? You don't ask that question today anymore. Satan, he's the greatest conspirator. Satan has designed a system where everything is controlled by the people that he controls. He only needs to put the ideas into their heads, and they can basically shut down the world and shut you out of the system. And there's nothing you can do about it because He first of all made us dependent on the system. He first of all created a system where we stop planting. Look, what happened in Jamaica is a revelation to me. When they opened up the thing to what they call this free trade system, you know, I know there are Americans in the room. I love you as my brothers and sisters, but your country, your government has done a lot of evil in the world. Okay, I've done a lot of evil. They talk about opening up. You know what? You know what America and Europe tried to do to poor little Jamaica. Okay, we were enslaved by Britain for so many years. You know what they did? They had an agreement that we had preferential treatment with our banana trade to Europe. Okay, Europe would take our banana and give us preference over anybody else because once they enslaved us, so they're going to allow us to have a little way to make a little. You know what happened? Americans started planting bananas in South America, okay? And their bananas, our bananas were getting preferential treatment. You know what the American government did? They pressured the Europeans into removing that preferential treatment so that the American bananas could go in on an equal footing. But the point is, the American bananas are produced in mass production in South America. They can be sold far more cheaply. And so the Jamaican banana industry dies. Our industry is dying because we can't get the market in Europe anymore. The American banana industry, these huge companies like Chiquita Banana and the rest of them, it's the way they operate. We must have the free market system. It's the way of capitalism. It's the way to go. So we buy goods and they buy our goods. Do you know what happens? Do you think our goods can make any headway in a place like America or Canada? All their goods come here. McDonald's come here. Kentucky Fried Chicken comes here. Wendy's comes here. They all come here. What do you think we can export to America? What do you think they will buy from us? It's one-way traffic. And so you know what happens? We die. Our Jamaican farmers don't plant anymore. Why? Because you can get potatoes from America cheaper than we can grow them here. We got a loan from the IMF. You know what is the condition? The money cannot be used to subsidize agricultural production. Can you imagine? We get money from the IMF and they tell us we cannot use it to buy fertilizer to subsidize our production. I don't know. Sometimes when I'm not into politics, but sometimes when I see these things, you know, they have a saying. They say that the donkey says the world is not level, and they say the poor donkey that said so must have been born in Jamaica. sometimes Jamaicans say that, but anyway, this is not politics. This is the Bible, and I don't have any business talking about things like that because that's the way of the world. Okay, the world is like that. But you know, the whole point I'm making is that behind all of this agenda, there is the agenda to make everybody dependent upon a system where they can turn the screws, they can turn the lock, and you submit or you die. That's the whole point about it. I might say America, but it's not America, it's Satan. It's Satan. He just uses the tools that he can use, okay? They must bring everybody to that place where you are so dependent upon the systems that they create. You have to depend on it. And if they turn the screw, you die. There's no other way that the mark of the beast can be implemented but in this way.
It's not only Jamaica, it happened the same in Romania, for example, when they joined EU. I remember when I was little that everybody had a garden and something planted because we do have gardens in Romania. But right now, I think on my mom's street, only my mom has a garden. Everybody else has grass in the garden because it's cheaper to buy.
I know. I went to Romania in 2004. Look here. I saw ducks on the road. I saw goats, chicken. I felt so comfortable, like it was almost home. I saw people, they say it was backward. People were driving donkey, horse-ridden carts all over the street. I went back, as I kept going back over the years, the last time I went there, highways, lorries. You have to go deep into the backwoods to find a little place where you see some geese on the road or some sheep or something. When I went there were shepherds on the hillside watching their sheep. Modernization is killing the old ways and killing people's initiative. Everybody depends upon these huge corporations. They come in, they call it progress. They destroy life. And it's all a part of Satan's program to make everybody so dependent upon one system that you have to conform or die. But no matter whether we rant or not, it's going to happen. And we just have to face that this is how it is because this is what Satan is after. And the Bible says it is happening. So the best we can do is follow the Lamb wherever he goes.
Yeah,
Amen.
Brother
And we
David.
also have the promise that God told us that we will miss at least bread and water, so we will be fine, we won't die.
Yeah.
Amen.
Go ahead,
You
Brother
know,
Keith.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I I can't help but think though that you know just as how when Jesus was ascended went to heaven and AD between AD 0 or AD 33 to AD let's say 8300. I mean, there was a total annihilation of the Christian church. I mean, it's as if you said you're a Christian, it was an automatic death to you, and I can't help but think that God somehow is allowing the world to get back there, and this time, unlike the first time, his coming will be right around the corner from that. And we just need to prepare ourselves for that. It's good, it's inevitable. We should not, you very passionately stated the case very, very nicely there, and it bothers you, it bothers me, it bothers all of us on this call. But still and for all, God is still in control and he knows what's going to happen. And we are not going to go to heaven from a state of complacency or comfort or, a state, go from our comfortable homes and bedrooms into the promised land. We're going to go through the ringer and a very deadly ringer too. So that's how I look at it.
Agreed, Brother Cliff. And that's the reason why I don't often speak about a situation like this because it's political and it's worldly and we don't have the answer to it. And it's inevitably, as you say, but sometimes something gets the better of me and I rant a little bit, but it's not my habit or my style. Go ahead, Sister Di.
Well, one thing I learned from studying about the Great Depression here, it lasted 10 years. And the thing, it was a 25% unemployment. And I thought, well, 25%, everybody wasn't broke, but that was high unemployment and the situation was very dire. And it lasted 10 years. And it took a while for it to get to the outskirts. I'm going to say like the farmers, because they didn't have suburbs back then, but people were farmers. And even though people suffered, they suffered more in the cities. You have to think about history. We got to learn from history. They suffered more in the cities because it was in the cities that they were so dependent on the corner store down the street for everything that they got. And it was the people in the country who would go to town once a month or maybe once a year to get their 50 pounds of flour, but they grew their stuff. They cured their meat. They had their vegetables. They put their stuff up. So while they suffered, it took longer for it to reach them to the point where it was in the city. When you see the pictures of the that time, you see the people in the cities, men begging for jobs and people. It was just, you see what I'm saying? So what we've got to think about now is history. You got to learn from history. We can't just think about the fact that famines are coming. We got to think about what's going to happen when you're near people who are hungry and are going to be desperate to kill you if they smell even your bread baking. We need to have a system in place to barter with people. And that way it will be easier to help witness to them if we're able to barter. So it's not just like saying, uh can you give me some corn? No, what can I barter for you for this corn? You see what I'm saying? So we should think about not just for ourselves but helping those other people who haven't prepared. So we need to be putting things away. When I think about putting things away, I can't eat all the dried stuff and dehydrated stuff and canned food stuff just for me. I'm just one person, but I know that I'll have it to share. I know all the toilet paper that I did not store up during COVID, just so you know. I was doing it before COVID. I will barter, because when the Lord told me to get the toilet paper, people would laugh at me and say, "Well, I don't know. The Lord tell me to get the toilet paper." And so I said, maybe I'll have to barter with it. It was a joke. This was in 2016 that I started going to Costco getting the toilet paper. And so when the toilet paper shorted and these people started acting a fool over toilet paper, I was so shocked. I was so shocked. But I just thank God that I had toilet paper. So when somebody needed something, I had toilet paper to share.
That was crazy to me to see people stocking up on toilet paper. Anyway, all right, Brother Tony, go ahead, and then I'm going to close the meeting, and then we can continue afterwards if we wish.
You know, I really feel just like it was in the destruction of Jerusalem, where you know they were eating babies and everything. We're going to come back to them times again.
Hard to believe, but I think we can expect it because human nature does not change. That's one of the things I
Right.
always remember when I think about really, are people going to burn people alive anymore? And then I see it happening. I actually saw it on YouTube. I saw them burning a girl in India. I don't know what she did. I guess YouTube is not allowing those things anymore, but I saw them burning a girl alive. Horrific. And human
They
nature
do
does
it in
not change.
America.
Yeah. Anyway, before we close, Sister Lorena, if you are listening, how is Brian doing?
Sisters, happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath, Sister.
Yes, he is doing so much better. I have to send a video. He sent a video. We sent a video thanking everyone for their prayers. And you will see the state he's in. He went to church with us. He is really interested in the walk with God because he says he's survived this for a reason and he wants to find out what that is. So he's studying the Bible and he's trying, but I pray that he stays on the walk. And I want to thank everyone here for praying for him. I'm so thankful. I believe in corporate prayer. I believe in prayer, and I think God did all of this. These are miracles that he did. So thank you all very much.
All right, Sister Lorena. Thank you for updating us, and we will keep him in prayer. And thank you very much. It's very encouraging to all of us to hear that he is not only doing better, but he is trying to find out how to have a relationship with God.
Amen.
All right, let's pray.